Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something that might seem pretty basic at first, but I think you'll find it's way more complicated than you think. We're talking about soap. Or maybe not soap, because it turns out there are tons of soap substitutes out there, so we're going to try to sort it all out. With us today to help do that is an expert in all things soap. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to dive in.
Yeah, so I think the best place to start might be with like the most basic question. What even is soap? Like, what makes soap soap?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most people think of soap as just that bar of stuff you use to wash your hands, but it actually has a really specific chemical definition. It's basically a salt that's made from a fatty acid. And it's been around for a really, really long time. Like we're talking ancient Babylon, 2800 BC. People were already using soap-like materials way back then.
2800 BC. So like
Whoa.
way before they had indoor plumbing, people were already worried about being clean.
Yeah.
But was that like the same kind of soap we use today? Or was it like totally different?
It was definitely different. It's more accurate to call them proto-soaps. They weren't really the foaming, deliberately made soap bars that we're used to. That came a bit later. The real turning point was when people figured out the right balance of fat and alkali to use.
Okay, so to get real soap, you need fat and alkali.
Yeah.
But like, how did people even figure that out? Was it just like a lucky accident?
Well, there's actually a really interesting historical connection here. So the Mesopotamians, who were, the ones with those early proto-soap, they were also really into making perfumes.
Perfumes. What does perfume have to do with soap?
It turns out that some of the processes they used for washing materials used in those perfumes could actually produce a decent amount of soap as a byproduct.
Whoa, so like they were accidentally making soap while trying to make fancy smells.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got the Mesopotamians accidentally making soap. But how do we get from there to the bars and bottles of soap we see everywhere today?
Well, it was a gradual evolution.
Yeah.
The Romans, for example, even though they're famous for their baths, they actually preferred to clean themselves with oil and a scraping tool.
Wait, a scraping tool?
Yeah, they'd rub oil on their skin and then scrape it off with this metal tool.
Ouch.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very pleasant. But eventually they started using soap after they encountered the Gauls, and in fact, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, he actually credits the Gauls with inventing soap.
So the Romans learned about soap from the Gauls. Makes sense, I guess, if you're using that scraping tool, anything's got to be an improvement. But what I've always wondered about soap is like, how is it actually made? It's like a super complicated process.
It's actually not that complicated. The traditional method is you basically mix fats or oils with a strong base like lye, and then a chemical reaction happens called saponification, which essentially means that the lye breaks down the fats into soap and glycerin.
Saponification. Okay, that's a pretty big word. Is there a way to explain that without like needing a chemistry degree?
Sure, think of it this way. The lye is like a tiny pair of scissors, and it cuts the fat molecules into smaller pieces. And those pieces rearrange themselves and form soap on one side and glycerin on the other.
Okay, so it's like the lye is chopping up the fat molecules,
Yeah.
and that's what makes soap. I can kind of picture that. But one thing I've noticed is that there are like so many different kinds of soap. You've got hard bar soaps, you've got liquid soaps, you've even got those like creamy moisturizing soaps. Is that all because of like the type of fat that's used?
The type of fat definitely plays a role. Different fats and oils give you different textures and lathering qualities. Like coconut oil, for example, will make a hard cleansing soap, while olive oil will make a softer bar. But the type of alkali metal used also makes a difference.
Alkali metal, like
Yep.
from the periodic table.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is getting a little sciencey, but I'm kind of interested.
Well, to keep it simple, if you use sodium in the process, you'll get those firm bar soaps that we're all used to. But if you use potassium, you'll end up with a softer soap or even a liquid soap.
Oh, interesting. So there's a whole science to making the perfect bar of soap. It's way more complicated than I thought. But what about all those other cleaning products we use? Like laundry detergent, dish soap, body wash. Are all of those true soaps as well?
That's where things get even more interesting. A lot of those products aren't actually soap at all. They're what we call synthetic detergents. And this shift to detergents really started taking off during World War II.
World War II. Wow, I did not see that coming. What happened during the war that made people switch to detergents?
Well, a couple of things happened. First, there was a shortage of fats during the war, and as we know, you need fats to make traditional soap. And second, these new synthetic detergents, they worked a lot better with hard water. which is a big problem for
Well,
soap.
hard water is the worst. It
Yeah.
leaves that gross soap scum everywhere.
Exactly. So basically, people switched to detergents because they were more convenient and they worked better in a lot of situations.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have a feeling this story doesn't end there.
Mm.
There had to be some kind of downside to these new detergents, right?
Yeah. You're right. There was a pretty big downside. It turns out that those early synthetic detergents, they weren't very good for the environment. The problem was their molecular structure. They had these branched carbon chains, and those chains made it really hard for nature to break them down.
So they were like sticking around in the environment and causing problems. What kind of problems are we talking about?
Think like massive foam buildups in water treatment plants, rivers clogged with suds. There were even reports of huge foam flotillas forming on waterways.
Whoa, a sudsy apocalypse. It does not sound good. So they figured out that these detergents were bad for the environment. What did they do about it?
Well, thankfully, people started to notice the problem, and there was a lot of public pressure to do something. So eventually, those harmful branched chain surfactants, they were banned by 1965.
Okay, so they got rid of the really bad stuff. But these newer detergents, they're still synthetic, right? And they're still made from petroleum.
That's right.
So are there any truly sustainable alternatives out there, like detergents that are gentle on both us and the environment?
That's the million-dollar question. And scientists are working on it. One promising area of research is something called alkyl polyglycosides, or APGs. And these are derived from plants like palm or wheat.
Plant-derived detergents. That sounds amazing. How do they compare to the petroleum-based ones?
Well, the early research is pretty promising. They seem to be much gentler on the skin, and they don't seem to pose a big risk to the environment. But we still need more research to be sure, especially if they become really popular and widely used.
So a potential game changer. But more research is needed. It seems like there's always a trade-off. We want clean clothes and sparkling dishes, but not if it means destroying the planet.
Exactly. And it's not just the cleaning agents themselves that we need to think about. There's another ingredient that's been a major player in the cleaning world, and it's caused a lot of controversy: phosphates.
Phosphates? Aren't those like in fertilizer? What are they doing in our cleaning products?
You're right, they are in fertilizer. And in detergents, they actually do something similar. They help to boost the cleaning power, especially in areas with hard water.
So they help to get our clothes really clean. What's the problem with that?
The problem is kind of like with fertilizer runoff. When too much of it gets into rivers and lakes, it causes problems. And the same thing happens with phosphates from detergents. They end up in waterways, and they act like a super fertilizer for algae. And that leads to these huge algae blooms, which suck up all the oxygen in the water. And that's really harmful to fish and other aquatic life.
I've seen pictures of those algae blooms. They're like really nasty.
They are. And they're not just ugly. They can really mess up entire ecosystems. Back in the 1970s, it was estimated that detergents were responsible for half of all the phosphates released by humans.
Half. That's insane. So what do they do about it?
A lot has been done, actually. Starting in the 1960s and 70s, water treatment plants started adding processes to remove phosphates from the water.
Oh, okay. So they're like filtering out the phosphates.
Right. But the thing is, those processes were mainly designed for big water treatment plants. Smaller plants, especially in rural areas, they often didn't have the resources to implement them.
So like depending on where you lived, you might be more exposed to phosphates in the water.
Exactly. But along with those technological solutions, there were also some regulations put in place to limit phosphate use. By the 1990s, a lot of U.S. states had banned or limited phosphates in laundry detergents.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah, but there was a catch. Dish detergents often weren't regulated.
Oh, so you could still have phosphates in your dish soap.
That's right.
Interesting. What about in Europe? Did they do anything about phosphates?
Yeah, the European Union took a much stricter approach. They completely banned phosphates in both laundry and dish detergents for consumers by 2017.
Wow, a total ban. So are phosphates pretty much a thing of the past now?
Well, there's still some debate about whether bans are the best way to go. Some people argue that it would be better to focus on making sure that all treatment plants can remove phosphates effectively, regardless of their size.
So instead of trying to get rid of phosphates entirely, we should just focus on making sure we can clean them up.
It's serious.
I mean, that makes sense. But while that debate goes on, there's another interesting development in detergent technology that's been happening.
Oh, yeah.
Enzymes.
Ah, yes. Enzymes.
So like the ones that help us digest food.
Exactly.
What are they doing in our laundry detergent?
Well, they basically do the same thing in our laundry as they do in our stomachs. They break things down. In our stomachs, they break down food. And in our laundry, they break down dirt and grease.
Wow, so they're like tiny little cleaning machines?
Pretty much.
So are they like better than the regular surfactants?
They have some advantages. For example, enzymes can work really well at lower temperatures, which means you can wash your clothes in cold water and still get them clean.
Wait, you can wash clothes in cold water? I always thought you needed hot water for a good clean.
That's what a lot of people think. But with these new enzyme detergents, you can actually get your clothes just as clean using cold water.
And that's better for the environment, right?
Exactly. Using cold water saves a lot of energy.
Okay, I'm definitely got to try that. So we've got these newer detergents that are biodegradable. And now we've got enzyme technology. It seems like the cleaning industry is constantly coming up with new stuff.
It definitely is.
But is there anything we should be cautious about? Are there any downsides to these innovations?
It's always good to be cautious. Not all cleaning innovations are created equal. And even products that are marketed as green or natural can still contain harmful ingredients.
So there's greenwashing in the cleaning aisle too.
Absolutely.
What kind of things should we be looking out for?
Well, for one, some dishwashing detergents can actually be quite poisonous if they're swallowed.
Really?
Yeah. And even products that seem harmless can contain chemicals like formaldehyde, which is a probable carcinogen.
Wow, that's scary. It's like you need a chemistry degree just to figure out what's safe to use.
It can feel that way. That's why it's so important to do your research. And there are some good resources out there to help you. Like the EPA has a program called Safer Choice, and they have a really rigorous certification process to identify products that are safer for human health and the environment.
Okay, so look for the Safer Choice label.
Yeah.
Got it. Any other tips for navigating this whole cleaning product minefield?
Well, if you want to be extra careful, there's always the option of going back to basics.
Back to basics.
Yeah, like using simple ingredients that you can find in your pantry.
Like vinegar and baking soda.
Exactly. You'd be surprised how effective those can be.
So it's like we're going back to the way our grandparents used to clean.
Kinda.
I like it. It's like a cleaning revolution, but with a vintage twist.
Yeah.
So we've got all these options. High-tech detergents, simple pantry staples. It seems like there's a cleaning solution out there for everyone.
There definitely is. And I think that brings us to the most important question. What factors will guide your choices when it comes to cleaning?
It really is kind of overwhelming when you start to think about all the different choices.
Yeah, it can be. But if you're feeling lost, just remember that sometimes the simplest approach is best.
Okay, so what's the simplest approach when it comes to cleaning?
Think about how people cleaned before all these mass-produced soaps and detergents were around. They had to rely on what nature provided.
Right.
And those natural solutions can still be really effective today.
Okay, so like vinegar and baking soda. Are there any other cleaning secrets hiding in our pantry?
Oh, totally. Baking soda, for example. It's a great scrubbing agent, and it can really help to neutralize odors. And lemon juice. That's a natural disinfectant, and it can help to remove stains.
I've never thought about using lemon juice for cleaning.
It really works. And then there's good old-fashioned salt. That can be great for cleaning greasy pots and pans. Or stained cutting boards. All sorts of stuff.
It's like we're channeling our inner pioneers.
Exactly.
Embracing the cleaning wisdom of our ancestors.
It's a reminder that we don't always need all those fancy chemical-laden products.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, I think we've officially cleaned up on knowledge today. We've learned about the history of soap, the science of detergents. We even uncovered some hidden cleaning gems from the past.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that even something as simple as cleaning can have a big impact on the environment.
Absolutely.
And it's up to each of us to make conscious choices about the products we use.
I think that's a great point. Every choice we make matters.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep making those informed decisions that contribute to a more sustainable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to everyone listening, until next time, stay clean and stay curious.